Tonight, an appalling loss of life. That's the government's verdict on the renewed violence in Gaza. Foreign Secretary David Lammy says he strongly opposes the escalation of military action and confirms a British aid worker was hurt in a strike on a UN compound. Israel's ambassador to the UK joins us in the studio. Also tonight, Keir Starmer tours a nuclear submarine before talks on the coalition of the willing. But will the PM get his wish of turning political momentum into concrete military plans? The former SNP chief executive Peter Murrells is charged with embezzlement, but Nicola Sturgeon is no longer under investigation over misuse of party funds. Has Kevin Bader not given up on the local election hopes already after a pretty bleak assessment of their chances at the party's campaign launch? Plus, people, not peers. The protest in the House of Lords calling for a radical change to the second chamber. Definitely not changing tonight. Simon Clarke and Emily Thornberry, who'll be with us for the next hour. It's Thursday. I'm Sophy Ridge, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. We start tonight with the worsening situation in Gaza. 85 Palestinians were killed overnight in Israeli strikes, that's according to the Hamas-run Health Ministry. And Hamas fired 3 rockets at Israel. It's been a bloody and heart-wrenching week in the war. The ceasefire seems to be in tatters. Children are dying again. And Tuesday may have been the single deadliest day for Palestinians since the war began. Here's the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, in the House of Commons today.
We strongly oppose Israel's resumption of hostilities. We urgently want to see a return to a ceasefire. More bloodshed is in no one's interests. Hamas must release all the hostages and negotiations must resume. Madam Deputy Speaker, diplomacy is the only way to achieve security for both Israelis and Palestinians.
Well, the Foreign Secretary went on to say that Israel's actions in Gaza are a clear risk of breaching international humanitarian law. Responding in the Commons, his opposite number, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Priti Patel, had this to say.
We should be very clear. The onus is squarely on Hamas. Hamas could agree to release these hostages now and avert any escalation. This is the moment for the UK government to show leadership with the international community to exert maximum pressure on Hamas to release these hostages.
Well, the dying has started again because the ceasefire talks are in limbo. Phase 1 has been completed. Hamas wanted to move on to Phase 2 to negotiate Israel's permanent withdrawal from Gaza and the release of the hostages in exchange for more prisoners. Israel wanted to temporarily extend Phase 1 and for more hostages to be released. Once again, it's difficult to see a way through the impasse, and with no movement forward, we're just stuck in the same cycle. Well, in a moment, I'll be joined in the studio by Israel's ambassador to the UK, that is Tzipi Hotovely. But first, our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, has the latest on the situation in Gaza. A warning, his report does contain distressing content, including images of body bags from the start.
The days in Gaza, once again, are spent burying the dead. In a matter of seconds, in the darkness of last night, Alaa Abu Halal lost his wife, his son, and his unborn child. Their small tent gave them some shelter, but no protection. This morning, he laid into the ground all the close family that he had. Alaa is now alone in life, but not in grief. Not in Gaza, where everyone is mourning someone.
That the war returns, and at its start, the targets are the innocent, the pure, those who've barely seen the world. This is something heavy and difficult. You flee during war to keep your family and children safe, yet here he is, dead. They were all martyred.
This morning, elsewhere in Gaza and after another airstrike, another baby was pulled from the rubble. This time, alive. Her father, though, was killed.
في طفلة واحنا بنشتغل When we asked people, they said she's a month old and she's been under the rubble. Since dawn, she's been screaming and falling silent from time to time until we were able to get her out a short while ago, and thank God she's safe.
Israel has expanded its ground operations to all areas of Gaza. The IDF has warned of further escalations. Israel has also prevented the entry of humanitarian aid for weeks. No food, no water, no fuel, no medicine is allowed in. That and the heavy airstrikes has pushed hospitals to breaking point. Hospitals that were already largely destroyed from 15.5 months of war. The British government has reiterated its opposition to Israel's actions and said that Israel must allow aid into Gaza immediately.
I could have been a little clearer in the House on Monday. Our position remains that Israel's actions in Gaza are a clear risk of breaching international humanitarian law.
Today, for the first time since Israel broke the ceasefire 3 days ago, Hamas fired rockets towards Tel Aviv. One was intercepted and 2 fell in open areas. No one was injured. Right now, the prospect of new ceasefire talks and the prospect of a new ceasefire are getting more remote every passing day. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, in Jerusalem.
Well, we can speak now to Israel's ambassador to the United Kingdom, that is Tzipi Hotovely. Thank you very much for being on.
Good evening, Sophie.
We've just seen some really devastating footage of a man who's lost his family, of a baby being pulled from the rubble. Figures, according to the health ministry run by Hamas, say that more than 400 people were killed in airstrikes by Israel this week. What is your response to that?
I share this sadness that I see on your face about the human tragedy that Hamas is creating. Hamas has the direct fault for this. You need to understand, Israel never targets civilians. And we're in a point where Hamas uses its people as human shields, as you all know, and it's doing it in the most cynical way to make sure you will report it in Sky News, to make sure that Israel will look like it's harming civilians when we never harm civilians.
I agree with you that Hamas is a terrorist organisation. I agree that Hamas murdered, raped innocent people. And I agree that Hamas, I'm sure, sometimes uses civilians as human shields. But I'm not doing an interview with Hamas. I'm doing an interview with the Israeli ambassador. And so it is right for me to talk to you about Israel's actions and what has happened. So what is your response? That's the question. What is your response?
So I'm giving you the most clear answer. We got into a situation where Hamas breached the ceasefire, stopped releasing our hostages. You were talking about a person that lost his family. Let me tell you about another person who lost his family in the hands of Hamas. His name is Eli Sharabi. Eli Sharabi was delivering the most moving and, in a way, the most shocking speech in the UN today. He was speaking about his horrific experience in captivity in the hands of those terrorists. He said, I was treated worse than an animal. I had to beg for food, and I had to beg to use the bathroom. And then he said, I saw as an eyewitness that when the humanitarian aid got in, it was getting into the tunnels, and UN and UNRWA labels were getting into the tunnels to those terrorists. Dozens and dozens of boxes. This is eyewitness that is speaking about the horrors that those terrorists are creating, both to Israelis and to Palestinians. And this is my point.
In no way
Hamas cannot control the Gaza Strip if we want a better future.
In no way am I trying to lessen, denigrate the experience of the hostages. I've done a lot of work talking to hostage families doing this. But today, I want to talk to you about the people who are losing their lives in Gaza. You say that Hamas broke the ceasefire.
Right.
But Hamas released all of the hostages that was agreed in phase 1. Phase 2 has not begun yet. So how has Hamas broken the ceasefire?
Let's get the facts right.
Because some people would say that it's Israel that's broken the ceasefire by the airstrikes and also by the limited ground operation that you were doing in an area that you were not supposed to be in.
Let's get the facts right. We had an agreement led by American envoy Witkoff. The agreement was very simple. 42 days for the first phase. At the 1st of March, this phase was over. So Israel agreed to continue the ceasefire, just in one condition.
Yeah,
but please let me finish. Please let me finish, because people don't get the framework that we were working on. The framework was very clear. Hamas must release hostages in every single week. We waited 3 weeks. We waited 3 weeks with no hostages being released. Do you expect Israel to sit and do nothing when 59 people from our people are dying there in the tunnels? Do you expect Israel to do nothing?
That's absolutely not.
Thank you.
But my confusion here is, right, phase one ended, as you said. Hamas released all of those hostages. I accept some of them were dead, some of them were in awful conditions. I completely accept that.
We all remember the Bibas family funeral that was devastating.
They released the hostages that were agreed in phase one. The original deal was then that phase two would begin, which Israel has not accepted. Israel wants to continue with phase one. So some would say that you have renegade on the original deal, that it was Israel who's renegade on that original deal and not Hamas.
Sophie, as I said again, Israel wanted to do a long ceasefire just for one reason. We don't want to fight. This is our brothers
but phase two
and
is
our
about
sons.
With the permanent withdrawal and the release of all the hostages.
Listen to me.
If I got this wrong, am I?
Yes.
But I don't.
Yes, you're getting it wrong because you don't understand the agreement.
The agreement was phase one, which has been completed,
finished at 1st of March,
moving into phase two, and you and the US, I agree, are trying to continue
the phases
phase
included,
one, but that was not the original agreement.
The phases included releasing hostages. It didn't happen. Hamas breached the agreement. It's so simple. There is nothing here not to understand.
Hamas released all of the hostages that were agreed in phase one, and phase two has not started.
No, that wasn't the deal. Witkoff said, we will extend the ceasefire if Hamas will release hostages. I'm sure you remember that. And then that was the point where Hamas breached the agreement by not releasing the hostages. Basically, Hamas is not releasing hostages anymore. He's refusing to his part in the deal. And this is why Hamas breached the deal. And Israel has no other choice rather than putting pressure on a terror organization. We are not dealing with nice British government. We're dealing with terrorists. We are not dealing with civilized people. We're dealing with people that brutally murdered more than 2,000 Israelis throughout the years. So we're talking about people that don't care about the life of the hostages or the life of the Palestinians in Gaza. So if you want the suffer to finish, all we need to do, both of us, is to say Hamas must release all the 59 hostages. This is the only way out of the circle. There is no way out if Israel would just sit there, do nothing, and then magic will happen. There is no magic.
Well, phase two was that was the framework to get to the situation that you have. But I just want to read a statement from the Hostages and Missing Families Forum, because this is a point that can be made much more powerfully than me. They say that the Israeli government is choosing to give up the lives of the hostages. We are horrified, furious and scared by the intentional shattering of the process of returning our loved ones from the terrible Hamas captivity. The return of fighting before the return of the last hostage will cost us the 59 hostages who are still in Gaza.
You have no idea how much I understand. If I was in their shoes, I would have done anything to bring back my loved ones. And more than that, we as embassy, this is our top priority, to make sure the hostages issue will be a top priority for any government in the world. Everyone must pressure.
But they don't think it is. They don't think it is. They don't understand why you have resumed the fighting when all of the evidence shows that the vast majority of hostages has been released.
So I will speak from the bottom of my heart to those dear families that I love, and nothing is more important to this government than releasing the hostages and making sure Hamas won't control the Gaza Strip. There is no other way rather than pressure.
They disagree. They say that is a complete misdirection because, in their words, military pressure endangers hostages and soldiers. And we've seen it, 3 Israelis hostages killed by the action.
So let me just remind you that the only hostages deals that we managed to get from Hamas was under severe military pressure. It didn't just happen. And I also want to remind everyone that when Trump got into the White House, he said, unless the hostages will be released, then Hamas will really have to suffer hell from the way he looked at it as a must-happen thing, that all the hostages must be released. So this didn't happen just because we did nothing. It happened thanks to the fact we were fighting for so many days, and Hamas understood that pressure and more pressure will make him lose his control on the Gaza Strip.
You talked there about what Donald Trump said, and I just want to talk to you about what the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has said. He said, Hamas has already felt the blow of our arm in the last 24 hours. I want to assure you this is just the beginning. The Defence Minister, Israel Katz, has threatened to open the gates of hell in Gaza if hostages are not released. What does that look like?
Oh, I think it can look very calm if the hostages will be released.
No, they're talking about opening the gates of hell. They're saying that the footage that we've seen of babies being pulled from rubble is just the beginning. So I'm asking you, what does this look like?
No, just reminding you, it can finish today. It can finish today.
What does opening the gates in hell and Gaza mean?
But why you think about the bad option when there is a good option? There is a good option here. If everyone in the world will say it's unacceptable, Hamas must release the Israeli hostages, and there is no option for Hamas to keep on controlling the Gaza Strip after the 7th of October. They cannot control this place. Israel cannot have this terror organization on its doorstep. Then we'll be in a different place. I mean, I think we identify right what we want to see. We want to see thriving Palestinian people. We want to see thriving Israel. It cannot happen with Hamas. Cannot happen with Hamas.
When you look at the devastation, when you look at the words of allies like the United Kingdom who criticised Israel recently, do you ever have moments of self-doubt and think maybe you were doing exactly what the Hamas terrorists wanted you to do when they, responding exactly in the way they wanted you to do when they did what they did on October the 7th? They want to destroy Israel. They want to associate Israel with dead babies. And every dead baby that you see, that people witness, makes a world turn against Israel. Are you falling into Hamas's trap?
The opposite. I think that when I'm thinking about any Western country that went through a massive terror trauma, I'm thinking about Americans after October 7th. I'm thinking about Americans after September 11, Israel after October 7th, the UK after different bombing. You had the Manchester Arena, you had the 7/7 attacks. Every life-willing country, every country that wants its people to be safe, has to make sure that the terror organization won't be a threat. This is why we're such a strong allies with the UK on defense and intelligence. We share so much to protect our people. And I think beyond the fact that we all want peace to our people and to our regions, I really think we do everything to eradicate the radicals. And this is the time to say, you cannot have peace without eradicating the radicals. And we must do that. And Hamas has proven to the world, as just like the British inquiry, the incredible parliamentary inquiry that Professor Andrew Roberts was leading this week in Parliament, was showing Hamas is one of those terror groups. We'll be reminded down in history as the one that did one of the most barbaric attacks, and by the way, that killed most British people in a terror attack than you had in other British attacks here in London. So I think this devastating fact that Parliament was bringing to the table, the fact that so many Israelis were really trying to ignore the fact there is a terror organization out there. And we said, we just want you to live in peace. We want to live in peace and you will live in peace. It just doesn't work. If there is a radical force want to eliminate Israel, to destroy Israel, this is a serious problem, both to Israel and to Western countries, and we need to fight it.
Can I ask you just finally on the UK response? Today, the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, said it's difficult to see how denying humanitarian assistance to a civilian population can be compatible with international law. I mean, he's choosing his words carefully, but he clearly thinks you've broken international law.
So let me just say a very important fact. 25,000 trucks were getting into Gaza just during the ceasefire. We're talking about just through a very, very short time. Israel delivered humanitarian aid in
what's your reaction to David Lammy's?
So my answer is Israel stands with the humanitarian international law, because if you know, the First Convention, the Geneva Convention says very clearly that in a case where your enemy is using the humanitarian aid, looting it and diverting it to its own war machine, then you're not supposed to supply and make sure that he won't get to fuel the war machine.
That's not what David Lammy thinks.
David Lammy should read this chapter, because I don't mean David Lammy, because it's a legal thing. He's a foreign secretary. I'm sure he knows that fact, that as a matter of fact, Hamas is looting this humanitarian aid.
He thinks you're breaking international law. That's what he thinks.
And I'm saying again, we stand totally in line with international humanitarian law by doing that. We don't want to fuel Hamas war machine. And this is why we supplied Gaza with humanitarian aid throughout the war. We won't fuel Hamas. We will make sure that the Palestinians will have food, but Hamas won't have it to loot it and to trade it and to empower itself and to regroup to make sure Israel will be under another 7th of October attack. We will never give that a hint.
OK, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, to the war in Ukraine now and the ongoing effort to reach a peace deal. Today, Volodymyr Zelensky stressed the need for continued pressure on Russia, and Sir Keir Starmer said it's essential that members of his so-called coalition of the willing are ready to react quickly if a ceasefire deal is agreed. After an inspection of one of Britain's nuclear submarines, the Prime Minister spent the afternoon meeting military chiefs to develop a plan for a peacekeeping force if there is an end to the war and the Russians relent on the use of NATO troops. Our Defence and Security Editor, Deborah Haynes, has this report.
The first public signs of a so-called coalition of the willing in action. Senior officers from more than 30 nations meeting in the UK to work up plans for an international force to help secure any ceasefire in Ukraine. The war zone mapped out. Britain's Prime Minister also in the room.
And now is the time to be doing this. We don't know what the outcome of any talks is going to be.
The UK and France want to build a reassurance force to deter further Russian attacks by land, sea and air if the fighting stops. But it's a race against time as Donald Trump pushes for Moscow and Kyiv to declare peace.
It is vitally important that we do that work because we know one thing for certain, which is a deal without anything behind it is something that Putin will breach. We know that because it's happened before, and I'm absolutely clear in my mind it will happen again.
The government has chosen to take a leading role in the creation of this coalition of the willing, but the greatest will in the world won't deter Russia without hard military power. Decades of defence cuts here means Britain could only muster a few thousand troops for Ukraine, supported by a handful of jets and even fewer warships. It's an important reality check for an operation that's being planned without direct US military support, given that the UK's limited capabilities are far greater than those of most European allies. Important too to remember the UK is also a nuclear power, a status the Prime Minister chose to showcase this week as he boarded one of the Royal Navy's 4 nuclear-armed submarines. HMS Vanguard had just returned from a lengthy patrol. Filming on board is very rare and strictly controlled. It's why all sound was removed. But the fact this footage was released at all will doubtless catch Russia's attention.
Madam President.
Committed to working with Washington on peace plans, Ukraine's president beamed into a meeting of EU leaders with a warning about Vladimir Putin.
One moment they give their word, and a few hours later it means absolutely nothing. That's why we must keep pushing Russia toward peace together with you, of course, with the United States and with our partners. We can do this.
In Ukraine, Russian attacks still pound this country. More peace talks are planned, but no evidence yet of any desire by Moscow to cease fire. Deborah Haynes, Sky News.
Well, our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is here. John, what more can you tell us?
Well, it's all about military planning now. If you like, the politicians have had their say, and it's down to the planning now. I thought what was interesting today, the Prime Minister, first of all, went up to Barrow, and then I think he went to the Northolt, wasn't it, where he went, who's speaking. We saw him in Deborah's report. But slight doubts as whether there's going to be a peace deal or not. He said at one point, it was actually in an interview with Sky News, we don't know if there will be a deal. I certainly hope there will be. But what he then went on to say was, it's really important we're able to react straight away. And that was the purpose, really, of that. But the symbolism, really, isn't it? Those pictures I thought of the Prime Minister and John Healey on the submarine, there they are, particularly showing a readiness for some sort of British involvement there. Now, what the PM's been talking about today is keeping the skies safe, the seas safe, the border safe and secure in Ukraine, working at pace, he said. So whilst the Prime Minister has a doubt clearly as to whether there's going to be a deal, and of course President Putin seems to be stalling and so on, and I think perhaps there's even a doubt in Washington, even despite the very bullish talk we expect and we get from President Trump. There are doubts creeping in, but clearly the PM's view is we've got to be ready to get to move into action. But there's so many unanswered questions, of course, because President Putin is still saying, well, you can't do this and you can't do that. So that raises. Well, it suggests that President Putin's playing for time, but clearly the Prime Minister here doesn't want to delay things any longer. And his key message is we've got to be ready if there's a deal. Though I do detect a slight doubt on his part if there is going to be a deal.
John, thank you very much indeed. John Craig there. Well, of course, the situation in Ukraine and also, of course, in Gaza is sure to feature in tomorrow's newspapers. We'll have our extended press preview from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be the UK Director of the research group More in Common, Luke Trill, and the Labour peer and broadcaster, Baroness Hazarika. Right, let's bring in our duo for the evening, shall we? The former Conservative Minister, now Director of the think tank Onward, Sir Simon Clarke, and the Chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Dame Emily Thornberry. Great to have you both with us tonight. It's been a very kind of heavy start to the programme. It does feel, I guess, quite depressing when you look at the state of the world. Emily, firstly, what are your thoughts on the interview and what is happening in Gaza?
So I think that what the ambassador was failing to acknowledge is that the deal that was agreed was one that many people in the international community, including President Biden, felt was ready to go last summer. And first of all, there were grave doubts as to why it had taken so long for it to be implemented in January. It could have happened much earlier. Biden said that, and the rest of the community feel the same. And it happens in phases. And as you were trying to say, phase one is a kind of almost like the easy bit. You release hostages and we will release prisoners and there will be a ceasefire. And then we move to phase two. And phase two is Israeli withdrawal, but still more hostages and more prisoners being released. And, and also negotiations beginning for what will be the long-term future for Gaza. Now, what happened was that we got to the 1st of March and the Israelis unilaterally, as far as I can see, said, we're not going into phase two. We want to just stay on phase one. We want to just keep having more hostages and releasing prisoners. We're not prepared to talk about moving out of Gaza, nor are we prepared to talk about a future for Gaza. And the reason for that is because Netanyahu is clinging on to power by his fingernails. He has to pass a budget at the end of March, and he has to pass that budget in order to continue the government that he's in charge of. And if he isn't in charge of the government in Israel, he personally gets into a great deal of trouble. There are court cases swirling around him, there are inquiries and everything else. So what he wants to do is he wants to extend that period as long as he can, and so that he can keep in power. He then begins the bombing. I'm sorry to be quite as brutal as this, but I really can't see any other explanation for this. He begins the bombing. Ben-Gvir, who's pulled out of his government, comes back into the government again, so helping to shore up the government, helping to get his budget through. And in the meantime, 300 plus Palestinians are killed. And the war aims are not clear as to what it is that they're doing. Who is it that they're going after? They say they're still going after Hamas after all this time. But how is it, if they're going after Hamas in a way which is proportionate, that we get so many civilians that are killed? And that is the problem. And that is the problem the Israeli ambassador has when it comes to answering this. Because, of course, all of this is predicated on the fact that it is completely inhuman to take hostages and keep them underground. I met a woman a couple of weeks ago who had been kept underground for 55 days, and frankly, two of the young girls that she was sharing a bed with were taken off and abused and raped, and she tried to be a sort of mother figure to them. And then her husband was held for another 500 days. And she comes out now, and she, with the other hostage families, says Do not start the war again. We will lose the rest of the hostages who are alive at the moment. And she says, I have sleepless nights about many things. One of the things I have sleepless nights about is the mothers in Gaza.
Simon, what's your take?
It's an awful situation, and no one can watch those reports and feel anything other than horror at what's happening, and what will, I fear, continue to happen in the days ahead, because it doesn't seem to me as though any reset is particularly likely. Ultimately, it is the case, and we must never lose sight of it, that Hamas are responsible for this ghastly wave of violence which has engulfed the region. It is in their power to release the hostages, and I believe that they should, not least because if they want to, if you like, establish any kind of moral high ground in this contest with Israel, showing that they have done all in their power, that sits within their power, to end the conflict would be the right thing to do. And it would, at that point, make a continuation of the war unviable, right? At that point, it would be unequivocal that Israel has no grounds on which to continue the military dimension of this process.
But, for example, they did agree, nearly a year ago, to a ceasefire with phases. That was what Hamas agreed to. It's just that, essentially what happened was that Netanyahu pulled that agreement at the last minute, and the war continued for another 9 months. I'm just saying, if we're talking about high ground, if we are going to talk in those terms, we have to bear that in mind.
Yeah. Look, I mean, this is it is literally, I think, probably about the most morally complicated situation I can envisage. But if we are to draw the sting from this situation, release the hostages, and then I think there will be an overwhelming global consensus that there is no basis on which the war should continue.
Thank you both very much. Really difficult subject to talk about and reflect on, particularly when you're thinking about the loss of life. It's just too much. Thank you both very much. You're watching The Politics Hub. Coming up, police confirm the former Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon is no longer under investigation. On the day her estranged husband Peter Morrell appears in court, charged with embezzlement.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Do you fear a fourth indictment? Does your government owe an apology to the British home children?
Great to see you.
Does your government owe them an apology? The fact that they were intercepted, does that indicate a military weakness on the part of Iran?
No.
Free, wherever you get your news. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. You can feel a devastating power. It had been a difficult night in a deadly storm.
Bang, bang. You can hear it hitting the windows.
Our houses are okay.
It's depressing.
As bad as all of this is, it could have been much worse. Today, this land they call sacred is at the heart of America's electric car revolution.
To me, it's a sacred ground.
The white gold rush is a race that Biden doesn't want to lose. I've covered some of the biggest stories in the world. Donald Trump, 45th President of the United States, it would appear is about to learn his fate.
Escort coming out!
San Quentin houses America's largest death row. They rarely allow cameras onto the condemned block.
James Matthews, Sky News. I want to be treated equally like everyone else. It's one step closer to getting out, to getting off death row.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
You're diminished by claims that you're a racist.
Question?
Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Vladimir Putin calls you outstanding. What do you call him, sir?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Hello, welcome back. The former Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has been cleared in an investigation into the finances of the Scottish National Party. The former party treasurer, Colin Beattie, has also been cleared of any wrongdoing. But Peter Morrell, the SNP's former chief executive and Mrs Sturgeon's estranged husband, was charged with embezzlement at a court hearing in Edinburgh. We can go and talk to our Scotland correspondent Conor Gillies, who joins us now. Conor, what more can you tell us?
Yeah, good evening, Sophie. For 4 long years, the SNP has felt the political pain of this investigation, this police probe examining their funding and their finances. It was around 2 years ago now when Nicola Sturgeon, the longest-serving SNP leader and First Minister of Scotland, suddenly announced that she was quitting the job. Fast forward a few months after that, she found herself facing almost 10, 12 hours of police questioning under caution as a suspect in this investigation. Her house was raided that she shares with her estranged husband, Peter Morrell, and clearly there was a lot of fallout from that and questions surrounding that police inquiry. Well, today came confirmation that Nicola Sturgeon is cleared of any criminality. The investigation into her has concluded and she is free to go. She clearly feels a sense of vindication at this today. She says she feels a sense of relief as well. And when I asked her whether she has concerns about how long it took to get to this point, considering it's almost 2 years on from her arrest, from when she became a suspect here, she said that there was never a scrap of evidence at all as part of this for her, and it's been hanging over her. She says it was difficult and it has been frustrating. Let's get a sense as to what she told us reporters outside her house on the outskirts of Glasgow earlier on today.
Today is a day of mixed emotions for me, but I was advised earlier today that after a very thorough investigation of all of the evidence, there will be no action taken against me. In other words, I am completely in the clear. That is the outcome I would always have expected. As I have said to all of you many times, I have done nothing wrong, so I was confident of reaching at this point and getting to this outcome, but obviously it is a relief now to have that confirmed. For almost 2 years, I have had this cloud of investigation hanging over me. I think it won't surprise anybody to hear me say that's not been an easy experience. So to reach this point today is obviously something I am relieved about. I've been trying to get on with my life and I now intend to do that.
Reaction this evening from the current First Minister of Scotland, John Swinney, the current SNP leader. He is suggesting that the SNP has potentially been the alleged victim of embezzlement. And at the same time, at lunchtime today, when Nicola Sturgeon was told by officers that she was cleared of any criminality, at the same moment, her estranged husband, Peter Morrell, was appearing in court as part of this criminal investigation, facing one single charge of embezzlement. He entered no plea as part of that and he was released on bail. The rules around the criminal justice system here in Scotland suggest that any accused person must face trial within 18 months. So clearly the days, the weeks, the months ahead will be vital. But as it stands tonight, Nicola Sturgeon is cleared as part of this inquiry.
Conor, thank you very much indeed. Coming up next on the Politics Hub. Kemi Badenoch gives a bit of a bleak warning at her party's local election launch on how the Conservatives could fare in the polls in May. So what's the plan to urge voters to back them? We'll have the details. Hello, welcome back. Now, for the Conservatives, it's probably already felt like a pretty long year in politics. A historic general election defeat, difficult polling, and of course pressure from Reform UK nipping at their heels, or overtaking them in some polls as well. And then today, a rather bleak prediction from the party's leader about their potential fate at the local elections on the 1st of May. Speaking at the launch of her party's campaign, Kemi Badenoch said that almost every council the Conservatives won in 2021 could be lost in this year's polls. So expectation management or another real hurdle ahead for the Conservatives. That really is, wipe out. Is it realistic?
Well, look, I was in that speech. I went to Buckingham this morning, and on one level, you always get expectation management at this stage before a set of local elections, and the expectations of the Conservatives that they're not going to have a great time. And it's always difficult because they're the opposition party, and actually Labour have declined in the opinion polls compared to where they were in the general election. Yet here we are. It's quite possible that the Tories have the worst light on May the 1st when we get the set of local elections. But at the same time, it's quite unusual to have the party leader fronting the negative message like that. But again, I think that there's an argument for that. Kemi Badenoch is somebody who likes to present herself as delivering the hard truths. So more or less, I think that bit of it is business as usual. The problem, Sophie, was something else, is that she didn't have that much to say apart from that. And as you say, Reform UK is snapping at her heels, her party's heels, all sorts of talks about deals and the whatnot. So the question for her is, how does she define the Conservative Party differently to the challenger from Nigel Farage? So I asked her about that at the launch. See what you think of the answer. Kemi Badenoch, what are the ideological and policy differences between the Conservatives under your leadership and Reform UK?
So one of the things which I've been saying quite frequently, and I did in my speech on Tuesday when I launched our policy renewal programme, was that we don't just make announcements, we have a plan. Loads of other parties just tell people what they think they want to hear. We think through and make sure that we are providing a credible plan that can be delivered. A lot of people have lost trust in politics because politicians make promises and don't deliver. We also fell foul of that from time to time. And what I'm saying now is that the Conservative Party is under new leadership. This is not show business. This is not a game. This is about people's lives. This is not for us. It is for all those people out there who need credible politicians. That is what we're offering.
Did you hear an answer? I didn't hear an answer. Maybe you did. I certainly didn't.
Sam, you did this with Ed Davey yesterday. You're basically just coming on and, savaging. No one's going to be interviewed by you anymore.
Oh, well. We've got to raise the bar. If we're pretending that politicians are being more eloquent and more interesting than most of the viewers will know that they are being, then they'll think less of us. Look, I don't think... I actually have some sympathy for Conservatives who say we can't have a proper policy platform at this stage in the Parliament. Of course, that's nonsense. I was quite surprised that she didn't have any sense of what her own ideological difference was with Reform UK. And so were MPs in the room, I have to say. They thought she didn't handle that question, really, the event, that well. So could do better from her own side. Let's see what the voters make on the 1st of May.
Let's do that indeed. Sam, thank you very much indeed. Sam Coates there, Deputy Political Editor. Before we get reaction from our panel on this, a reminder that we'll bring you full coverage of next week's Spring Statement here on Sky News. I'll be with you from 11 a.m. on Wednesday for the build-up, reaction and analysis. Right, let's bring in our duo for tonight again, shall we? Sam Clarke and Emily Thornberry. Sam was pretty scathing, I guess, at Kemi Badenoch. And, he's got a point, hasn't he? Surely she should be able to outline some differences between her and Reform. Otherwise, who's going to vote for you guys?
Well, look, the first thing to say is that I think the point that Kemi makes is around fundamental seriousness is well outlined by the difference between the speech that Kemi gave on Tuesday about net zero and Reform's effort on net zero a few weeks ago, which was such a car crash it had to be U-turned on within 24 hours. So I do think there is a difference between the Conservatives and Reform purely on the basis of who has a credible ambition to govern and who is a protest party. But there are more profound differences, and I think the years ahead will bring that more sharply into focus, particularly probably on issues like economics, where, you know, reform, I think, have a pretty left-wing outlook on lots of questions, and that is something which we should lean into. We are not reform. I think we are a more generous and optimistic party in reform. I think they have a more dystopian outlook on British society. These are going to be difficult elections. I mean, this is the other point I think we do have to land here. We are coming off in this cycle of local elections, the 2021 post-COVID relief rally that the Conservatives enjoyed. And in that set of elections, there was the parliamentary by-election in Hartlepool, which we won for the first time in quite literally 2, maybe even 3 generations. So
feels like another lifetime.
It is another lifetime ago. This is a hard...
Labour MP now.
Well, indeed, and that's the point, right? And that's the point that Kemi was making, that it is a genuinely difficult benchmark for the Conservatives to meet. And it is, I think, important as a matter of expectation management that is established clearly. But we do also want to emphasise, as Kemi did, that Conservative records in local government up and down the country are very strong, and we should be proud of that.
From Labour's perspective, who's the real opposition to you guys? Who is the biggest threat out of reform on the Conservatives?
I don't know. I mean, I think we're just trying to. I think we're really just trying to focus on doing what we promised we were going to do. Can I just say, it's so interesting. Kemi Badenoch saying this is not showbiz, and Simon just saying we're not an opposition. You know, we're not a what was it? Not an opposition, a protest party. I have to say there is an alternative leadership building up. You know, in Robert Jenrick, and if you go onto Robert Jenrick and you go onto the Twitter site, there is a very flash video of absolutely oppositional, you know, and performative politics going on, where he's putting up a video with various messages on the Ministry of Justice. And as I say, someone has spent a lot of money on the video. I don't know whether it's a Conservative Party, but I mean, you look and compare it to the efforts when they come to launching their local government campaign, and it's a poster saying, what was it, better services, lower taxes or something.
Which just happens happily to be true, right?
Well,
what do you think about Robert Jenrick?
I think the analysis...
Is it being helpful,
shows,
do you think?
I mean, let me just say... Let me just put this on the record. I mean, our analysis shows that, you know, your average Labour council, you know, people pay £300 less than an average...
OK, well, read the leaflets, guys, don't worry.
The mind boggles. But no, look, I'm a big fan of Rob's, and look, we need everybody in the condition that the party is in after losing the general... and you know what? I actually think that Rob is admirably trying to make a success of what is such a critical brief for the party on justice and, critically, human rights and immigration.
OK, thanks both very much. Still to come on the Politics Hub.
Still alive.
Protesters interrupt proceedings in the House of Lords, calling for it to be abolished. All the details next.
In February 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. Thousands of Russians were drafted. For some, the reality of frontline warfare meant one thing: desertion.
I had a rush of adrenaline. It was a kind of treason.
But they did not escape on their own.
I help people to desert Russian army.
The stakes are high, but for some, there's no other option.
We keep going till Putin's regime is over.
Escaping Putin on Sky News.
Big stories don't always come from big cities. I'm Lisa Dowd and I'm Sky's Midlands correspondent.
You are not getting in this elevator, okay?
The judge made it very clear that she could see no justifiable reason why Sakulas wasn't here facing British justice.
I promised I would get him justice.
Free, wherever you get your news. This is what they're up against. The wind is the really big problem. It is back-breaking work and the smoke is thick. It's been working well. Water levels are dropping, but no one knows what impact further rain will have. What would you do if this place wasn't open? This is the exact spot in Nottingham where their 19-year-old son, Barnaby Webber, lost his life.
I just think it's so cruel and so harsh.
It's really scary. We're terrified.
In this community, I'm told that everybody knows someone affected by COVID.
Hopefully this will be the last wave.
Sky News gets the full story first. Change seems tantalisingly close in this corner of the UK. Wales was the first to introduce the plastic bag charge. It's legal to let go. Set the speed and take the hands off. It's almost driverless, but not quite. Hans is a highly trained police dog. The force is incredible. It's really frightening, actually. This is my patch, my specialism. It's also my home.
Hello, welcome back. Well, a protest today has sent the House of Lords a-leaping. The anti-Lords group Assemble disrupted proceedings by shouting "Lords out, people in." And they also threw papers from the public gallery calling for the abolition of the unelected chamber. Let's take a look at the moment earlier today.
We have veterans who fought for our freedom still alive.
I'm sorry, let's pause for a second.
It's a very sort of delicate protest with the kind of papers gently weaving through the air down. We've got Simon and Emily. We've also got our chief political correspondent, John Craig. What was going on?
It's all very different in the Lords, of course, because in the Commons, as you two will recall, you've got that Perspex screen now, because I remember, was it the pro-Hunt people, I think?
No, I think it was,
Purple powder,
abseiling lesbians, wasn't it?
No, in the Commons I'm talking about. No, the pro-Hunt people.
Abseiling
was it Brian Ferry's son, as I recall?
Brian Ferry's son.
And then
He
the
came
purple
running
powder.
in from
Anyway,
Can we just talk about the abseiling lesbians? I just want to
There were abseiling lesbians who abseiled down from the public gallery, and they were protesting about, I'm not quite sure what, but they were definitely abseiling lesbians. And then there was the purple powder from the public gallery.
Yes.
But Brian Ferry's son came running in from behind the Speaker's chair.
Did he?
Yeah.
I thought he was up in the gallery.
No.
The point I'm making is there's more security in the Commons than there is in the Lords.
We're back with you, John.
These people were, as you said, Sophie, they are a group called Assemble. Now, there's some ironies here. It was a statement from Baroness Twycross, I think her name is, isn't it, on the celebrations for the anniversary of VE Day. And one of the senior government members over there said to me, how inappropriate when we're talking about VE Day for this protest to take place. And the other thing he said to me was, we went and picked all the papers up, keep calm and carry on, that's our motto in the House of Lords. But the other thing, the person we saw at the end of that little clip there, who was on the woolsack, one of the deputy speakers, is in the 5th Viscount Colville of Kouros, who is one of the hereditaries who is about to get kicked out of the Lords.
There you go.
Now, one of the protesters, a teacher. Why wasn't she in class? Lucy Porter, 50, a primary school teacher from Leeds. We're campaigning for a House of the People. It's a symbol of everything that's outdated. And then she said, one of the leaflets said, aristocrats and oligarchs out. Well, they're getting rid of the aristocrats, aren't they? With the hereditary peers going. Anyway, Number 10 were asked about this, actually, and they talked about... it's a manifesto commitment on the Lords. Protest is a matter for the parliamentary security people.
There you
go. And then they went on to say, we're committed to replacing the Lords with a second chamber with representative for regions and nations. Change is essential. But that's all been put on the back burner, hasn't it? I mean, the only thing they're doing at the moment is getting rid of their hereditaries.
Well, we're taking it step by step. So we're getting rid of the hereditaries. We're then going to bring in a retirement age. which is a bit controversial.
Well, it
and
is,
there's a lot of
'cause all of your peers are
debate.
overrated.
Well, we have some outstandingly good peers who are overrated. And so they tend to. So people go, we don't want to get rid of,
So and so.
Yeah, I'm not going to
it's that
say,
great
but
person.
X and Y.
Yeah.
That's kind of difficult. But we do need to have people who are sufficiently fit to be able to do. It's quite onerous work in the Lords if you're going to take it seriously.
Well, they sit longer than the House of
They
Commons.
seem
I mean,
to
you
sit
lot all
longer
pack
than
up
us.
about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the Lords sit long into the night.
No, sometimes it's absolutely right. It's absolutely right. Sometimes.
You and me protesting in the House of Commons. And, great to have you both on the programme today. Great to have you, as always, John Craig. The protest I always remember is when I saw one of my old school friends flashing in the gallery.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I know.
That was behind the screen. Then.
Yeah, behind the screen, yeah. I remember
No,
this.
it was
She
behind
wasn't
the
one of the
screen.
abseiling.
What was that protest about?
It was the environmental
See,
stuff.
this
There
is
you
the
go.
thing. You just remember the protests. You don't remember what they were
It's true, you
protesting
don't
about,
remember
and that's
things.
the thing.
I mean, it's the second breach in a fortnight. The guy on the tower.
We're out of time. We're out of time. It's been too good. See you tomorrow.